I'm delighted this morning to spend time with David Lawrenson, one of the UK's most noted bloggers on property, one of the most influential commentators as well. So David, you've spoken at numerous events over the last 10, maybe more years, possibly longer than 10 years. And I know you're speaking at the Property Investor Show coming forward in April this year as well. And in September, you're speaking at Wandsworth. And your key presentation will be focused on where the opportunities for landlords, because people talk about tax changes and so forth, and it's a difficult market for landlords. But just to focus on landlords and where you see the golden goose, where you see the transport connections having an effect.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, there's a number of things around the country. It's not just transport is one, general regeneration is another. We've always made a lot of money really just by buying into places before new rail routes or underground routes in London came up and running. And we've done that successfully over a long period of time and just achieved our performance there. Okay, so it's always quite a smart thing to do in the business of buy to let as opposed to property investment and development. So there's one of the places we bought most recently, our last property, was in Gravesend, and that was because in Gravesend there's going to be this big new themed park on the Swanscombe Peninsula nearby. That's between Dartford and Gravesend. It's going to be a few years before it's built. That's going to be a big employer and a major attraction. So I can see that being quite a significant one. It's also got very fast rail links from Ebbsfleet to King's Cross, St Pancras.
Oh, it's on the Ebbsfleet line?
Yeah, Ebbsfleet to St Pancras International. It's on the international route. And it takes about, I think it's about 18 minutes journey time to central London, which is pretty that part of the world.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't think people have really recognised the potential of that yet. There's been an awful lot of new property being built in that area, so that might soak up some demand, but it also will probably make the area a little bit more attractive because some of the quality of stock in that area isn't that great. So that's
David, can I interrupt you for a moment and just talk specifics? So in terms of what property prices are like in that area, in terms of averages, do you know what the averages are?
I don't, but I can tell you what the kind of thing we bought was a two-bedroom house in Gravesend. They can be got for in good condition for around about 220,000 still. We paid a bit less than that a couple of years ago, 200,000. So that's the kind of prices give you an idea of the kind of places that we buy in that area. So that's reasonably, it's still relatively inexpensive and generates a yield of about a net yield of about 4.85%, which is better than you can get in the bank, and potential capital growth too.
Okay, just on specifics, and I don't want to delay you. I know you're busy today, but in terms of that property which you bought, was there a lot of work for you to do? Was it an average type property?
It was an average type, but it didn't really have any work needing doing to it. That was
Well, okay, you have got me interested in that area, but I won't spoil the whole presentation what you're going to do now. So maybe we can catch up offline. But just going ahead, David. You mentioned about Gravesend, and then you were going to mention other areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, so thinking about places are relatively close to London. One project that's been announced already is this varsity line between Oxford and Cambridge. So as well as Oxford and Cambridge themselves, Bicester, Bedford, Milton Keynes are going to benefit from that too. Through the planned new housing will soak up some of the price rises there. So there's a package of money, £44 billion announced back end of last year to increase the delivery of new homes, including £30 million a year for 5 years towards infrastructure and affordable housing in Oxfordshire for the Cambridge, Oxford, Milton Keynes corridor. So and some of that cash will be for Didcot and Bicester, where 30,000 new homes are planned. So that's one near to London, which is a good one. Chris Grayling, the Transport Minister, back at the end of last year, said he was looking at which of the rail lines, which were shut in the 1960s under the beaching cuts, could be reopened. And I think the Campaign for Better Transport has made a list of 12 important and viable lines, they call it, that could be restarted across Britain. So that's worth checking out. It's the Campaign for Better Transport.
How far's that got, David? Do you know?
Well, this is just talk at the minute, but it's always good to keep an eye on that. So yeah, we're talking that this might happen. So I can talk more about things that are more likely to happen too, or things that are currently happening, if you want. So we can look at that. Further away from London, Birmingham Centre is seeing some big developments being announced on the back of HS2. And in Manchester, the area around Manchester Piccadilly Station is going to see a lot of residential and commercial development on the back of the fast link as well. And then you've got places close to Manchester Airport's HS2 stop, such as Hale and Wilmslow, which I think has got some nice housing stock there. That's also, I think, likely to do well because of HS2. Yeah.
Where do you keep up to date, David, with all this information?
I just read. I don't read that much, really. I read things like the Times, Bricks and Mortar, Daily Telegraph, Property Investor News. Richard Bowser's publication is very good as well. So I get a lot from that. They do some interesting. They do a lot of this kind of thing, looking at certain areas and do focuses. They'll do a focus on, say, East Anglia or something. They did a focus on Kent in the last edition. So that often talks about regeneration. It'll talk about improved transport infrastructure as well. That's a very good source and the best one I know. But apart from that, I just read all the property bits of the property sections of the newspapers. I get the FT at the weekend. That's good. The Times, the Telegraph at the weekend. Yeah, and that's how I keep up.
And sometimes you're not reading them. Sometimes you're actually featuring them as well.
Thank you. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes you're featured. That's true. Yeah.
Sure, David. Was there anything else you wanted to add before I mentioned about how people can connect with you?
No, that's just examples. There's other places we could talk about, but that just gives you an idea anyway of some of the places. But yeah, certainly. if you want to connect with me, it's on at lettingfocus.com. Yeah, you're going to tell the people anyway, aren't you? I think.
No, but lettingfocus.com is the main way to connect with you. David, just one other quick question about Gravesend. Grace. So some people may think, I think you said you bought that place 2 years ago. Is that right?
I paid 190,000, and it was 2 and a bit. Yeah, hang on. Yeah, 2 years ago, and we bought a place there. It was 190 we paid for a 2-bedroom house.
So some people listening to this conversation may think, that's great 2 years ago. However, is that really such a hotspot now? Because most people like yourself have discovered that particular location.
I don't think it's that many people have discovered it, actually. I think at the time we also looked along the Queen Elizabeth line, Crossrail, as it was. And we looked at Plumstead and Woolwich and Happy Wood. By the time we got to look, and that was 2-3 years ago, prices had already been factored in, so we're already too late there. But I think Gravesend's time is yet to come, mainly because of when that theme park is built, and that will be a few years away. And when there's quite a lot of improved housing around there, regeneration, and when people realise the fast connectedness of from Ebbsfleet to central London, that'll help. Generally speaking, people are moving. It's been over the last couple of years, and I think we'll see it in the future too. There's been an outperformance in the outer suburbs of London, and it's true of other cities too. As people go out in search of more affordable housing, they're prepared to commute a bit longer. So areas like Bexley, which is where I live in the borough of Bexley, has done quite well. A lot of the outer boroughs have tended to outperform the inner boroughs, where perhaps prices have ran ahead of themselves. So that's a general trend as well, I think, happening.
I was going to say to you though, in terms of the Ebbsfleet line, it's one of the more expensive lines to use on a regular basis, from my understanding.
It is slightly more expensive, that is correct. Yeah, I think say compared with say getting in on the train from say Northfleet, which is the nearest station, I think it's about 60% more, but it is a lot quicker. So yeah, I mean that is an issue. Yeah, with anything like that. So you do pay a premium for that. But also don't forget, it's of course an international line, so you can go from, if you fancy, you can go to Brussels and Paris
Sure.
on that line as well.
Okay, that it's definitely of interest for myself personally. It may be of interest to other people as well. So, David, people can reach you in April. I know you're going to be speaking at the Property Investor Show on both
Yeah,
days or one day?
I'm just speaking on, looking at my diary here, I'm speaking on the Friday the 20th at 3:30 in the afternoon at the
Okay.
Property Show. And of course,
And people can book that seminar place by
yeah,
going
two,
directly onto the website of the Property Investor Show.
yeah,
I don't know what it is off by heart, but I can add the description of how to book your place. Just remind the listeners again, David, the time is 3:30?
3:30 on Friday the 20th.
20th.
The other thing I do, I mean, of course, I do one-to-one advice for people wanting help and advice in relation to being a landlord, buy-to-let, investment. I still do that, one-to-one advice. That's a big part of what I do. Of course, we've got the book as well. 3 books I have, 1 for tenants and 2 for landlords. So do come to my website, lettingfocus.com, to check all that out. And do go on, get the book. It's still pretty good and relevant, up to date. The last edition of Successful Property Letting came out in 2017, but it's got most of the changes in it, most of the key changes recently. Yeah, and my other book for landlords and a book for tenants as well. And you can find them all there at lettingfocus.com.
David, I just want to say a huge thanks for taking time out